Hey everybody, David here, and welcome to the ASOG podcast. In this episode recorded live at the Tools Conference, Lucas discusses ADAS and how automotive professionals should be dealing with emergent technologies with Kip Nuesch, product sales specialist at Advance Auto Parts. Joining him is overall swell guy and friend of the podcast, Tom Schearer, owner of Schearer Sales and Service in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Before we get into it, do us a quick favor and head on over to youtube.com and type in ASOG. Once you see our channel, take a look around, and if you like what you see, a sub would be fantastic. If you're listening to this on your favorite podcast listening app, make sure that you have it set to automatically download the latest episode. And now, here we go.
Okay, so we're going to click that button over there. We're going to click that button right there. All right, so we're live. Back with Tom Schearer. Kip, you got to say last name, bro. I can't say it.
Kip Nuesch.
Nuesch. All right, I'm going to be able to get that down pat. I'm a Southern boy. I can get this right eventually.
I believe in you.
So my question is, we're right here at the end of the Tools event. Mm-hmm. And, I had a really cool conversation with Tom just a little bit earlier, talking about ADAS, right? Talking about kind of where we go from here. And so a while back, I had George Lesniak on the show.
Excellent.
Right? One smart fella right there.
Yeah.
I mean,
knows what he's doing.
George is a really smart fella. And so we were talking, and we were talking about things like static calibration versus dynamic calibration.
Right on.
And we're talking about the fact that there's so much going on in the shop owner groups especially, that folks are saying, but it's going to self-calibrate soon. We don't need ADAS calibration. We don't need to do this stuff now because it's going to self-calibrate. And George said, that's not true. Like, that's not ever.
I agree with George. I don't see it going that way.
Right. And I from what we heard from the manufacturers at that event, they're not even thinking about it. Like, they're going the opposite direction in a lot of ways. Tell us why that is.
My feeling is, we're going to need a professional to interrupt that process. A customer has a scenario where maybe they had a front-end collision.
Right.
Minor, superficial almost.
Right.
But there's been a compromise of that sensor.
Right.
Maybe the car doesn't pick it up right away. We need a professional to interrupt that system and say, hey, this car should be calibrated, or maybe it shouldn't. Right. We got to repair this before we do that. Or verify, no, that sensor's in its right place. We might not need to fix the bumper if the sensors hasn't been impacted. But this is what we're all working through right now. And right. I just don't see it. I mean, why make it automatic? Why make it fully adaptive?
Right.
It just doesn't make sense to me.
Exactly. Well, I mean, there's definitely challenges, especially when it comes down to some of the liability issues. And that's what you said, your guys, Tom, your guys were saying that, hey, we're worried about the liability of this.
Right.
We're worried about doing this and having liability consequences. And let's be real, what we've been saying on the podcast all along is not doing it is more of a liability than doing it. Sure. Right. And I mean, it just like all the other technology, it can be a little scary going into it. Right. And so when we start making this transition, when we start talking about doing this, Kip, what's the number one thing a shop owner needs to know?
Am I going to be able to do it the right way before I do this?
Yeah.
Do I bring in a professional who does this? Do I sublet it to somebody who knows? And where do I go for training so I can do it the right way?
Right.
Who are those sources?
Right.
That's probably where they should start thinking.
Yeah, I agree. And now I heard you today talking about the systems you really like. What systems do you like? I mean, what is your...
Well, for me, this is a ongoing conversation, right?
Right.
Looking at all the aftermarket systems,
mm-hmm.
I have them all available. We got to look at pedigree, right? You look at some of the great companies out there like Opus, and their tech service department, their remote programming service, you can trust them.
Right.
Are they perfect? No, none of us are. We don't know what we're doing.
Right.
And then the next piece is you got to look at coverage.
Right.
If there are roughly 60 known targets, and that customer, next to me is going to spend $25,000, $35,000, $40,000. What's he getting for that money? Clearly. And the manufacturers do their best, but there's a language that gets lost in the coverage. It's like, oh, we do almost everything. Well, for me, I want to make sure my customers get the right information.
Yeah.
And I would hate for somebody to be misled, or even if it was honest, that no, you can't do that one. Oh, you can't do that one either. And I don't want to be on the receiving end of that.
Right.
And I want to make sure that they spend their money wisely. So I look at the Autel system. And this is definitely not an Autel plug. And I think anybody who knows me knows I'm an Autel fanboy. Right?
Yeah, I love my Autel stuff.
They have the iCar approval.
Mm-hmm.
They have the factory equipment for, Jeep, Dodge, Chrysler, Fiat, Stellantis.
Okay.
That's a nice feather in their cap.
Yeah, it really is.
Not for nothing. But to be honest, I think every aftermarket system is a better uniform process than the OE way of doing it. Now, a lot of times you're going to want to, not a lot of times, there's times you're going to want to use the factory equipment to put the vehicle into calibration mode.
Right.
But, the targets are pretty good on the aftermarket systems, and they're having great success rates, and those safety systems are operating as designed, provided the professional interrupted the process and made sure that car was repaired as designed before the calibration process.
Right. So I've got a question for Tom that I'm probably going to forget if I ask this question, but I'm going to ask this question. You said the process, right? You've got a process.
Yeah.
What is the process? Share with us your process. When you're talking about interrupt the process, tell us what you mean by that. And that's probably David texting me because he's over here sending me a message. Let's see. Yep, that's him.
Tell David we all said hi.
Golly, he just can't for the life of him. So he's somewhere else critiquing what I'm doing. Right. Yes, David, we know we have a buzz. It's because somebody took their equipment out of the studio setup. And when they did that, they rerouted all the wires next to the power plugs. It's okay. I think it'll be fine. So long story short, you're saying interrupt the process. Give me an idea of what this process looks like in your head. We've had a collision? Is it that the car's broken? It's been worked on? What is the process?
Well, I think starts with education, being able to identify which vehicles have these systems.
Okay.
Now, you can walk around the exterior of the vehicle, and we look for those visual indicators. Let's look at the front end of the car. Are there parking sensors? That's pretty rudimentary, right? But let's look at the radar. Does that have a smooth emblem? Then there's a radar behind that. Windshield camera. Walk around, look for blind spot detection monitors.
Okay.
And if we start to see these systems, just a general walk around, I talk to technicians and shop owners and I say, listen, one of the things we did in Pennsylvania is we walk by every car and we're trained to the inspection stickers.
Right.
That makes sense. At this part of my career, I'm looking to see which cars have ADAS as I walk to the parking lot.
Yeah.
Now, if I see something, I see a car has ADAS and then I see some physical damage, I'm triggered. What I do about it, well, it depends on the scenario. Another way is when you're driving a car in as a technician, look at the buttons. Are there buttons to turn lane departure off? Are there buttons to turn, adaptive cruise is going to be automatic, cross traffic alert, whatever it may be, we can look into. But I think on every vehicle, we need a full system scan.
Okay.
It's always, nobody's going to argue that using the OE equipment isn't the best. It is.
Right.
Does it make great financial sense? Well, I don't know if I agree with that. So I think, getting a capable scan tool that can check every system, and some of the scan tools now, like the Autel, lets you know which module is an ADAS module.
Yeah. So that's pretty slick.
So if you see a fault code next to an ADAS module, again, you're triggered to think twice. I mean, if you ask any technician, is, adaptive front headlight system an ADAS module? If they think about it, of course, they're going to say yes in most cases.
Right.
But when we're just looking at a full list of modules, we get tunnel vision sometimes.
Exactly.
I do anyway.
Yeah.
So it's great that the tools tell us. So I think a full system scan along with a visual walk around, you can really tell a lot about the scenario. Now, once you put it up in the air, again, you're looking at some of the chassis pieces. And if you got to change the ride height according to OE service information, we're going to have to calibrate that vehicle. Yeah. And I'm, not pointing to one brand or another, but it's a process. I walk around and I evaluate, say, hey, when this car goes back out on the road, is it going to be as safe as possible?
Yeah.
because we as professionals are the ones that have direct knowledge that these systems exist, and we should know what it takes to repair them.
Yep. That's a really valid point. It's something we talked about over lunch. We have a professional obligation, right?
Yeah.
We're not just talking about, and it could be your wife that car's passing. It could be, and there's Scott Palava again. It could be any one of your family members passing that automobile.
Yeah.
Right. And to me, that's a big deal. I think that's really important to think about as a shop owner, as a technician, as a service advisor. And we've always said you're putting your good housekeeping seal of approval on that automobile that it's safe. And as a professional, it's our responsibility to advise the client, is it safe? Right? It doesn't matter if that's what they want to hear or not. You don't go to the doctor and he notices something that looks like cancer on your neck and expect him not to tell you about it. That's his responsibility. He's a professional. That's what he does.
That's
right. So I think that's such a big deal. Tom, you've mentioned buy-in. You've mentioned that and it was really fascinating to me because something that you said to me was, I don't want to do this because it's going to be wasted money if I don't have buy-in. And I agree with you. What is it that we're going to do to achieve buy-in, and how is it that we can? Is it through a system in the shop? Is it through a process in the shop? Is it through education? How do we get buy-in from a technician in something like this?
Well, so it's going to start with me. I need to take the time and express my true feelings and concern as far as taking this step into this, into the ADAS spectrum. But also, we're going to get our buddy Kip on up here, and he's going to spend some time educating our technicians on process, why, the what, why, the how, and we're all going to get on the same page and make them understand how important this is to be doing this.
Exactly.
And what a disservice we are doing to our clients for not offering and doing this.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure there's cars going out the door right now that should have this, and it's not, through our alignments and, everything else.
Exactly. So David's actually over here asking questions. What do we mean when we say buy-in from your perspective? Because that was kind of the verbiage you used with me. When you say buy-in, what are they saying? What is the feedback you're getting from those techs?
Well, so, what I'm getting from them is, I don't know that we should be doing this. I think we should be sending it out to somebody else. I'm worried about the liability. What kind of liability does that put on me as a technician?
Okay.
And, if I were to think deeper about this and get more in depth when we had that conversation, is the question should have been, what kind of liability are you putting on yourself for not doing this?
Yeah. That's a big deal.
It's not just me they're worried about themselves as a technician. Obviously I'm worried about myself as a company and my technician and my team.
Yeah.
So it's full circle there.
Well, and I think that's something that a lot of technicians never think about, is that they are the professional, right? And if something happens in a shop, right, the same thing can happen in a doctor's office. That doctor is the one licensed. That doctor is the one working on you. And if there's malpractice, boys, it starts with him. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And we talk about extreme ownership, right? And your team. It all starts at the head, right? And it all starts with that doctor, of course. But every other person down through that line, if they're not saying, hey, I'm a professional automotive technician and I believe we need to be doing this, I know we need to do this to this car, gosh, they probably are opening themselves to some liability, aren't they, Kip?
I think that goes back to the thing I said earlier. We have direct knowledge these systems exist, and we should know how to repair them.
Right.
Because customers bring their cars to us, they depend on us to send them back out the way they're supposed to work.
Right.
There's really, and the customer side of it also, they can't dictate whether this safety system should work or not. Like, the owner of a car can't waive away the rights of the passengers of his car. He definitely can't waive away the rights of somebody he might hit.
Right.
So knowing that these systems exist and not calibrating is just not an option. It's straight negligence.
I absolutely agree. And I know like in certain states and maybe there's even a federal law that says, you can't take out a tire pressure monitoring system. And if it's working, you can't disable it. Well, I mean, that kind of goes to the same thing. Just because the owner asked you to do something, and we were talking about this for shop owners earlier. Like you set the process in your shop. The client doesn't get the opportunity to come into the shop and define the process. That's the shop's responsibility. We can't allow the client to define the process because then the process breaks. Right? The process is built to protect the client. It's built to give them the very best value they can get for their dollar. It's built to make sure that the vehicle is repaired properly, that it's safe, and it's reliable. That's what our processes as automotive repair shops are designed to do. So why would we break that process? Why would we stop doing our job because the client comes in and says, I can't afford to fix that? Well, I understand, but this needs to be fixed. Right? I mean, you don't go to the doctor and say, well, I just want part of the hip replacement. I don't want to do it right. I
only want the outer brake pads.
Exactly. Dude, I've heard that before. I have seriously heard that. I have seriously heard that. I don't want both rotors. I just want one rotor. You don't want your shop or your car worked on in my shop. You need to take it somewhere else. So, when we talk investment, right, Kip? We're talking about $40,000, $50,000. We're talking about a ton of investment in time. We're talking about a ton of resources, right? We got to use a big bay. We got to put these things in. What incentives does a shop owner have to do this? Like, where does that, we've all heard these stories. David and I were talking about it recently where a shop near him saying, we're calibrating it for $129.95. And he's like,
why?
Are they calibrating is the first question.
They're removing the light, right?
Right, exactly. Or they're just checking the codes. Yep, none of it. Good.
So I think before we talk about the dollars, because in my opinion, dollars are irrelevant if there's return on investment.
Yes.
If I said, hey, you're going to spend $40,000 on this ADAS machine, Mr. Body Shop, where you're doing 300 cars a month, and half of those are going to need calibrations. That's 150 cars. At roughly 300, 350 calibration, that machine pays for itself in 1 month.
Right.
A lot of us go out and we buy a $60,000 alignment machine and we charge $129 for an alignment if we're getting what we want, right?
Right.
And then we make no qualms about making that investment.
Yeah.
And it's twice as much money and you're charging a third for the service.
Yeah.
ADAS is half as much and you're charging 3 times as much, said a different way.
Right.
If we identify the opportunity, perhaps doing a full system report on every vehicle will start to open our eyes about how much work is really out there. If we go to training, we're going to hear about the different things we do to cars and when a calibration is required. The education is almost not even training. It's just educating yourself.
Right.
I find a lot of people want to second guess the OE process. It's like, well, if you believe everything the engineers say, that's what has this industry going this direction. No, I trust the engineers. I mean, they're people, they make mistakes, but we start with OE service information. That's our trust point for me. So I know many customers got a full return on an investment in 2 months.
Wow.
And I got references if you'd like me to share them because I think people need to see I could not only send these cars out as designed and safe,
right.
I could actually put food on my table in a different way with a whole new revenue stream.
Right.
And all it takes is partnership. It takes a village. I mean, this is a big conversation with some of the best people in the industry. We need to get more people in the conversation instead of saying, hey, I don't want to hear it.
Exactly. Now, are you seeing the majority of your clients are body shops? Or are they?
I think the mechanical shops are the ones who see the business opportunity.
Okay.
Some body shops, I see this in the glass industry. Glass guys for the most part, don't have a scan tool background whatsoever.
Right.
And they're putting so many windshields and they see so much of this. They were just brazen enough to just go buy it from their glass supplier.
Wow.
I want to buy an ADAS machine from the guy who sells me glass. He's the guy visiting them every week. I need to do this so bad. I'm just going to make a $15,000 investment in the glass package and I'm going to get it done. And it was like do or die for them.
Right.
The body shops, they look at, I think, their monthly bills. If they're doing 100 calibrations a month, that number is in their face. And they're like, if I just give it a try and it works out half the time, I'll make so much money. But the mechanical guys are the ones who, in my opinion, are probably the most capable.
Yeah.
I mean, they have the scan tool background. They have the mechanical background. They get it.
Right.
So, I mean, doing body work is an art form.
It really is. It really is.
I can't even wash my car the right way. I have a lot of respect. But I think it's a new merger of the entities inside the automotive industry where they really have to work together.
Right. Well, one of the things Richard Falco says 28% of cars leaving a body shop need some sort of an ADAS calibration. Only 4% are getting done. That's a scary figure. Wow. I mean, that's boys, that's tough to listen to. Especially knowing that might be your wife. And if one of the big arguments we always hear is some of these systems aren't self-diagnosing. Some of these systems aren't going to report. They're not going to have a warning light. They're not going to say something's wrong. Is that still the case?
Yeah, you may not get an indicator in your dashboard that's not working as designed. On some systems, they can't tell.
Until it slams into the car in front of
Until it doesn't work.
Right. I've never been one to try and test those safety systems out. I typically don't try and slam into the car in front of me. So,
I think it's one of our favorite things as we develop this segment. I rent a car from maybe Enterprise. Shouldn't say that probably. But I'll calibrate it right to the edge of the threshold. Like if I get a Hyundai and I'm doing a lane departure warning camera, I'll get it right to the edge of the spec, but inside, and I'll see how that car performs going down the road. Now, naturally, during my demonstration, when I get to my destination, I'll get that thing's really dialed in and I'll return the car safely. But just to see how these systems respond, Richard Falco, he's one of the big trainers out there for ADAS, and we need to know. We need to test these things, and we need to put them back right.
Exactly, and understand the response. Understand what that car is going to do, and that's I think that's one of the things that's creating a lot of fear around this. Is there's a couple different camps. One of the camps is bury your head in the sand and pretend it's not happening. Now, Tom will tell you, shop owners, we're pretty good at that. I mean, we've been doing that for years. Hey, Falco wants to know if that was a fat joke.
No, it's an old joke.
Hey, he is getting up there. When I was young in this industry, he was already up there in years. He's 65 at least now, something like that.
He hides it well.
So, do we think this whole ADAS thing is going to bring up a whole new industry?
Yeah, possibly
for us.
I don't think it's new. It's just part of it.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing is we're talking about, when we came in, one of the things we started talking about is body shops. And he says, ouch, I'm leaving now. One of the big things that we've talked about here and there is we've talked a lot about body shops, and that body shops aren't necessarily charging appropriately, and they're not really given the opportunity to charge appropriately. Right?
It's been a challenge, yeah.
So where do we see this going if that is in fact the case, right? They're being beat up by these insurance companies. The insurance companies are not even willing to move on this. Are insurance companies paying for calibration now, or are they paying what's being asked of them?
I think insurance companies don't mind paying.
Okay.
As long as they're getting the documentation and the proof that this safety system is going to work as designed. Right. The intention is that person's going to be in less accidents.
Exactly. Reduce their overall investment.
Right. So why wouldn't they? I think there's been some, growing pains with what shops have been charging and not showing proof that they actually did it right.
Right. Show your work.
I almost don't blame the insurance companies in that regard. And I think with the amount of equipment out there that does document it, I think the insurance companies have to pay an appropriate rate. I think aftermarket businesses should be charging at least what the OE is charging.
Right.
Independent shops, they're doing it just as good in most cases when they are trained in doing it.
Right.
And there's a big gap in between those who are winging it and not doing it and those who are doing it right.
Right.
So I think it's a good opportunity. I mean, this is it's a turnkey business. You know, there's independent calibration centers out there who are aimed at doing it the best they can in a lot of cases. And, you know, for $40,000 plus a building, you got a turnkey business.
Right.
As I get older, I want to bend over less.
I know, right?
I know what would happen if I lost my job at Advance. I'd go out and buy an ASOG machine and
start doing calibrations.
Calibrations, yeah.
One of the questions I have about that is you know, we're seeing a lot of folks go out and do this as a mobile business. There's been a lot of discussion within ASOG alone.
Yeah.
Is that, you know, there's a guy that comes around with a little like enclosed trailer, and he comes around, he comes up and he's like, are you doing calibrations? We'll do them for you. We do them right here on site in this trailer. And I'm looking at the numbers and I'm saying that trailer's not that big, right? Like there's no way you can barely fit the car in the trailer. How are you?
You doing blind spot in that trailer?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So is it possible to do these mobile? In other words, we've heard guys say, no, you can do them outside. It's not that big of a deal. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the calibration process, in my opinion, starts with the integrity of the technician, right? Okay. They have to pause and say, am I going to follow the OE service information or am I going to shortcut it?
Yeah.
Or do I have what it takes to shortcut it and make sure it's done right? That's a hard thing to determine. If it says do it indoors, or if it says has even lighting, if it says to make sure there's no obstructions, at what point do they stop doing that and do it their way? And maybe the light goes out, and maybe their test drive sort of gets them a good idea that the system's working as designed. But then, do they get in an accident? It's too late. Yeah. I wouldn't second guess the process of a mobile technician unless I was standing there. I mean, I think that's a better question for a guy like Mike Reynolds, right? Maybe Keith Perkins, who are super in tune to how the process is done correctly and what's possible out there. Yeah, you could do it mobile a lot of times. Right. Customers ask me, well, if I do it mobile, you know, are all shops going to, you know, am I going to be able to do it everywhere? I'm like, no. I was like, you're going to have to find those shops.
Right.
That are good customers per se.
This guy's down here at the end of the table listening to, yes, David, that is what you hear down here. Scott Palava's over here interrupting as usual. Man, he's oblivious. Well, so you mentioned that if a shop could charge, David, if a shop could charge, what a dealer is charging. What are dealers charging?
Well, it depends. You know, you're doing an all systems calibration on a Volkswagen Audi. We've heard numbers, 14. I've seen invoices, $1,500.
Wow.
I've heard statics as low as $150 from a dealer.
Wow.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy.
It is.
Dynamics, $150. I can understand that when chilled on a GM or something. But, you know, I think the average, I think we all agree on, is kind of $350 to $400, maybe even $450, depending what market you're in.
Okay.
But then that's for single calibrations.
David is over here calling BS. David, who was it that you were saying was doing them really cheap? We'll see if we can get him to comment.
All right.
He's not very reliable when you need him to be reliable. He said they're charging $275 for an Audi here in Kansas City.
Well, all systems calibrations versus just like what system I would ask is probably for $275. Are they doing a whole vehicle for $275?
He says Honda's $175 and Ford is less.
Is it dynamic Ford or static Ford?
He doesn't know that. Come on now. He barely knows his name. Typically, I have to like tag him in post.
Dynamics are pretty. I mean, in my opinion, if the vehicle's correct, it's a pretty easy process. So yeah, that sounds appropriate. You can lay out those AVM mats pretty quick if you have a system and get it accurate, and could be. But yeah, I mean, don't take my word for it. Go to a body shop, look at their invoices. That's where I get my information from. What are the invoices I'm seeing that these body shops are dealing with that's causing them to buy this equipment?
Right.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. And maybe this is really what Tom's going through right now. He's trying to get the buy-in from his team. He's trying to make a decision on where he's going from here. He knows that this is something he needs to incorporate into his business. It's one of the things I'm going through right now, getting ready to build a new shop. I've got a purpose-built ADAS bay in the new shop. It's got dimmable lights over top of the ADAS area. Nice. It's got a engineered leveled floor. It's got the size requirements, the whole 9 yards. Where do you go from here? What's the next step? I mean, how do we equip the shop? How do we know the shop's equipped properly?
One of the things I offer, I think it's important that I do a site evaluation. Okay. And you shouldn't just get one from me, but you should get a site evaluation. Someone actually who's done the work, who can say, hey, this is going to be a concern, or this floor is not right, or that reflection, or that window, whatever the case may be, just do a site evaluation. Start there. And the size, of course, is the big question, right? I mean, you hear so many different things, but if you're going to build an ADAS bay, I'm sure, Lucas, you know what you're doing. Like, just go big or go home.
Absolutely.
No sense in trying to jockey cars around to be creative about target and car placement. Right. I think it's important, if we're going to get into this, it's just an open space. You're not putting lifts or anything in. It doesn't have to be that expensive. It just has to meet the criteria.
Right.
So I think that's the next step. I do a site evaluation, let them know, hey, this is how you can go out and market this business, that you can do 97% of them right here. And that way he knows what to expect as a business owner.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's his first step.
And then what's the next step? So walk us through the whole process. Tell us how do we determine what tool we want to use? How do we determine, technician? Do you look at the technicians and go through kind of an abilities check? What's your?
Well, I would start, I'll say a lot of things. So actually doing a calibration. So let's say a car's correct, right? And I do demos out there. It looks like a dog and pony show. My car's already correct. So I just have to put the target in the right spot, put the car in the calibration mode, and it goes. So doing calibrations is not that difficult, I think. Diagnosing why a car doesn't calibrate.
Yes.
Or even more important, understanding what the car is trying to do in that process.
Yeah.
Is you're going to want that background, because as soon as it doesn't calibrate, his employee is dead in the water if he doesn't have that background.
Right.
So I think the process would be to start with, tooling wise. I think one fundamental package, if we have a uniform way to place targets and we have the coverage that works, we start there.
Okay.
You're going to need, factory tooling in some scenarios. I mean, Nissan's got a security gateway module, and right now there's no good solution with an aftermarket tool to get around that.
Okay.
So we got to look at that, right? And what cars is that good on? 2019 Sentra and obviously new Nissans.
Right.
And just those types of scenarios. And that's really where it takes the village, of people to help you figure out, hey, what do I do on this car versus the other 90% that are working really easily.
Right. And what's really interesting about that is we talk about the shop owner network, Tom, right? We talk about having a network through ASOG and through our other resources, having that opportunity to talk and work back and forth and solve those problems. I don't know if you watch any of the technical stuff, but there are groups, and you jump in and George jumps in and Isaac jumps in and Keith jumps in, and all these people are trying to help one another and gain understanding of what's happening. Man, that networking is super powerful.
Right.
It's just like going to an event like this. I mean, you get in and you talk to some people, and you really, you find somebody that you can call if you're in trouble, right? And I think of all the times I've ever cost myself a blooming fortune is the times that I knew I was in trouble and I kept trying to push forward instead of stopping and saying, I need some help with that.
Absolutely.
David says, Nissans that need to be scanned needs to go to the junkyard. He says he said, you ask, is it calibrated? And they say, yep. He said, I've had to take turds to the dealership to get calibrated, and all they're saying is, we're calibrating it. And
yeah, documentation would be a little bit nicer to have, right?
Yeah.
Here's your receipt and it's calibrated. So one of the things I invite the independents, I go out to an independent. He's surrounded by dealerships. Of course, he knows a technician or two.
Right.
So I said, hey, why don't you have a conversation with that technician? I just did a calibration for you. You saw how it's done. Now talk to them about how it gets done and have them walk you through the process. See if they actually have an understanding.
Right.
If they can't talk you through the process, are they really doing it?
Yeah.
Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I'm not there, so I don't know. But, that's where I want to own my own repair.
Yeah.
Like,
yes.
Yeah, do I want to be profitable? I don't want to be negligent. At the end of the day, I want to own that repair.
It's mine, and I
Right.
if somebody's insurance is paying for it, I know it's mine. We're not questioning. We're not, if it was a screw up, at least I can say it was my screw up.
Right. Exactly.
That's a valid point. So I think that's really important to think about, especially if you're outsourcing, if you're subletting this. Tom, what are you doing right now as far as that goes? Are you subletting stuff out? Or are you just avoiding it altogether?
Let me pull my head out of the sand real quick to answer that question.
I love the honesty though.
Hey, listen, there is probably not a more honest shop owner in the world. I'm going to tell you that much.
So, it's, we're doing nothing at this point. If there's something that is coming in that's a problem, we're not touching it. We are referring it out to a dealer or somebody who can handle that. But, knowing that's going on, we know it's time. I know it needs to be done. I just need to get my team on board with that.
So what does that process look like for you?
Well,
I know you're going to bring him up, but then
I need to
walk us through it.
So basically, I'm gonna go back and we're gonna have a conversation. We'll have a conversation this week on some of the things that I've gone over this weekend, and just discuss that with the team and discuss where we're going, and get their just do a temperature check, see where they're at with it. Is it still in the same? Are they still in the same position that we were before? Are they more open to it at this point? But at the same time, it's going to be letting them know this is happening. Yeah. This is something that we are going to do, and we're going to bring somebody in that's going to get you in to know.
Now, are you in a facility where you're going to have room to do that? Or are you going to go down to the warehouse and do that?
I feel we're going to have room. I do have a concern about interruptions of other technicians due to the way our shop is laid out.
Okay.
But,
are you thinking on the alignment rack? Or?
I was thinking about the alignment rack, although I heard Kip's comments about that yesterday because we do have a pit.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of close to the wall.
Yeah.
So that almost puts us, we have a one door at the end of the shop, pull in, turn left to go into the lifts, and then pull straight through to get to the alignment bay. So we have a big area, but we tie that up doing ADAS. Now we can't get cars on and off the lifts. So
right.
It's something I'm going to need some outside input from from you when you come up, and we'll just kind of get an idea and see where we need to go with it. If I have to do something else, we have to. But it'd be really cool to be able to make it work with what we got.
Yeah, that would be really cool. You got a beautiful shop, man. You really
Thank you. And, the other part of this was I was talking to Kip yesterday about, because I think we've gone pretty much OE with all of our diagnostic tooling.
It's fantastic.
And,
right.
One of my questions was, do I invest into the OE ADAS tooling? And it sounds like, the pretty hard answer that I got from Kip was that's not a good idea.
If you're going to declare yourself a full ADAS shop.
Right.
The OE tooling's the best. If he said, hey, I just want the Volkswagen, Mercedes, BMW targets, I would recommend OE. But if you want to declare yourself an ADAS shop, I think the uniformity of the aftermarket systems is really attractive. So, it's kind of two perspectives. If you're just going to stick with Europeans, I would go OE equipment. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if I communicate that right.
And that'll be a conversation to have with my team and that's a strategy to think about.
Yeah. I find glass shops who take on ADAS for windshields, they go out and get the rest of the package.
Really?
And they're doing all vehicles, which depending on the individual could be good or could be really scary.
Right.
But they have the open spaces.
Right.
It's about target placement, but it's also about understanding what the car is trying to do. And that's where I think the scary part comes in.
Yeah. Well, so Eric Bach just said, use your showroom. And I,
That's a thought.
it really is. And now, so I had this completely additional thought to what Eric said is, you've got this beautiful space, this beautiful showroom, customer or client education on this, right? Because they know their car's doing something different than it's ever been doing before. Mm-hmm. Do we start bringing clients in and show them what's different about this? How do we educate our clients about this system, about this process, and about why it's somewhat required now? How do we have that conversation with them?
I think that's the mystery.
It really is.
In my job, I go out and I work with guys like Tom, and I get them to a point of education. And it takes a village. You got Rich Falco, we got Mike Reynolds, and all the people that are out there having a conversation support the business owners. Now, the business owners, they know their customers best, and they're gonna have to come up with a language that's simple enough, but it's also direct enough that this is not something you want to think about. You just do it.
Yeah.
I think we need Samantha. Samantha needs to make a video.
Yes.
That's where it needs to start.
Yes, I agree. Let's make her do that.
Didn't mean to interrupt you, Kip.
It's perfect.
Well, I think that over the years, and it was so funny. My friend Justin Allen a while back, he said, "Hey," he said, "You're service advisors," and I said, "Yeah." He said, "They're telling clients they need their cars aligned," and I said, "Okay." He said, "They need to explain that, make sure the tires are pointed in the right direction." And I was like, huh? He's like, people don't know, like they hear the term alignment, but it doesn't mean anything to them.
No.
You've got to go further. You've got to explain what this means. What are the consequences of not doing this? You know what I'm saying? Those are really important aspects of this.
Yep.
And I think it is so important when we look at educating the clients on items like this, right? That front counter staff have some knowledge, right? That we're training front counter staff, even in some cases, like we do training both ways in the shops. And so we'll have technical classes for the service advisors with the techs, and we'll have management and sales and leadership training for the techs with the service advisors and myself. And that's been a huge asset for me. And so one of the things that I have noticed with that is that now they feel confident when they're talking. They feel confident when they're explaining. "Oh, Mr. Client, we just went through a class about this, and here's how this works." This is why that's important. Now, I don't believe in using fear to sell service, but I also know that if there's something that could lead to a potential safety concern with the client's vehicle, it's my responsibility as a professional to say, just like the cancer conversation, doctor says, "Look, you need to get that looked at." Even if he doesn't do something about it, it's his responsibility to tell you about it.
Right.
Same thing in this, right?
Is it okay to, when you're talking about brakes, and say, listen, one of two things is going to stop you, either that brake pedal or the wall?
Yeah,
Is it
exactly.
all right to talk like that?
Exactly. Or my technician's toolbox.
Yeah, there you go.
It happened. It happened. He bought a new toolbox, so that was great. Ryan Jackals, man, I tell you.
Pump the brakes when you're done, right?
That's it. No, he we had a car that was in the shop, and the client had worked on the brakes himself. And he didn't put the brake hoses, brake lines, brake calipers, anything back on the car. And so Ryan pulled it down into the lot a couple days before, and he said, "Dude, it stopped when I went down there. I pushed the brake pedal and it stopped." And I'm like, it might have stopped, but I don't think it had anything to do with you pushing the brake pedal, because it doesn't even have a master cylinder on it, like there's nothing there. And so he pulls into the shop the next day, and he comes rolling in the shop, and he's just, like a day and a half after he bought a brand new toolbox, and he comes into the shop and pow, right in the toolbox. I've got it on video, and him holding his hands over his face like that. It was truly priceless. Luckily it was an old wore out car. It was junk, but, so, I think that education of the client is going to be a real challenge in this. I think that we're bringing a new technology in. Now, that being said, we've got a new client, right? We really do. The drivers of today's automobiles are not the drivers that we had 5 or 6 years ago. And you know something else that I've been thinking a lot about on this that's going to change is we've seen a lot of this. We've seen a lot of techs buying their own tools because the shop won't properly tool up. Boys, that's not going to happen with this.
Nope.
I mean, it's going to be mighty tough if you think you're going to do that.
And you don't want them doing that either, because they're going to realize quickly that there's a whole new business model for them out there.
Yeah.
So
exactly. That makes them a very valuable technician. It makes them to where they can just go do their own, like you're talking about, just do calibrations. So, I mean, you know, this takes a lot of stuff off the table when it comes to things like that, especially when it comes to treating and equipping your technicians the right way. That, man, you're not going to be able to do this and expect your technicians to buy the tool to do it.
It's a good thing no technicians are listening right now to figure that out.
Yeah. Dude, I'm telling you all the time, if you listen to the podcast, you hear us say all the time, why do good technicians stay at bad shops? And why do good shops keep bad technicians, right? I mean, I hate to throw people under the bus, but I mean, let's be real about it. That's what it is. Mm-hmm. And that has an impact on our industry. And I think it has an impact on everybody else too, right? It has an impact on every industry, but I think we're plagued by that in a way that a lot of others are not. And you know, I can't remember who it was I was talking to. It may have been an ETI where, well, you know, OBD, I'm not going to do that. And then, you know, these oversized wheels and tires, I'm not going to do that. And TPMS, I'm not going to do that. And I'm not going to do this. And I'm not going to do this. And now you drive around, and I've noticed up here, there's a lot of shops that look like they're from the 1970s up here. There's very few Schearer Sales and Service on the corner up here. Right. And it's sad because you see them slowly becoming less and less relevant. Right. And you see the very few shops shining through that are equipped and capable of handling this. So I guess the question for a shop owner is which do you want to be? Do you want to be the shop that continues to fade away? Is that what your hope is? To not have the money to pay the bills, to not have the equipment to properly fix the automobile? Kip, are we going to get to a point where we can't fix the car without calibration? How close are we to that?
I haven't thought about it.
Yeah, there's going to be something that's going to happen.
Like they're going to force it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like on the diesel side where they're cutting the car down if you're not doing what you got to do with the DEF.
I think we're a long way off from that, but I could see it being a possibility.
All right. I mean, it's a major safety thing.
Yeah.
And you know, I was talking to Donnie earlier and talking about access to automobiles. You know, those are all things that we have to think about moving forward. Technicians, owners alike, you know, we have to be thinking about where we're headed, not just where we're at right now, but what's coming down the road. Yesterday we had a guest on, and he said, we as an industry have been reactive for years. Let's be proactive. Mm-hmm. Let's think ahead. Let's prepare for what's coming, not the other way around. So, you know, that I think that's definitely a big thing. Something that we're not really doing right now.
Yep.
You know, so any closing thoughts? Anything you want to say?
There's a big network out there. There's resources. There's support. There's a lot of people that want to provide partnership. There's some of the best training programs. Like I know David Friend does a really great ADAS program down his neck of the woods, and you don't have to stick your head in the sand anymore.
Right.
You know, reach out, speak up, social media, you know, that don't be one of those shops that's not adapting.
Yeah.
And listen, it's a little bit about liability, but as a business owner, it's about profitability.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
This is one of the most profitable segments in the automotive industry.
Yeah. And
it's not impossible.
Exactly. So, I agree 110%. Tom Schearer, closing thoughts. You know, you've been at Tools this weekend. Did you come last year?
I did not. No,
what do you think? What are your closing thoughts? You're a powerhouse in our industry, and they care what you think. What do you think? I mean, honest reaction from both of you about the event.
I think the event was great. You know, I believe we need some more training options.
Right.
For for everybody.
Okay.
Not so generalized. Maybe some focus on some Asian stuff, some European stuff. Obviously, I'm looking for European.
Yeah,
because that's what we focus on.
Yeah.
It was great. Some great management stuff this weekend. We got Kim and Brian Walker did a great job on their marketing. 2 programs up, two courses up here.
Right.
So I had to put that plug in for them because
they're awesome people. Yeah, so, just to come to a podcast. I know, right?
But no, it's great. One thing I'd like to go back to on the ADAS, so we talk about liability and everything else. What do you see as far as technicians half-assing the process? And is it possible? And
it's possible.
Kip gives me a look. Yes, you can say whatever you want. You want curse words, you want whatever. Listen, we've got David usually. There's probably nothing you're going to be able to drop. No.
He definitely has to. He's on the top of the mountain when it comes to that. That's for sure. No, there's no room for that. There's no room for half-assing anything. And we do it. So if we give them some sort of green light to half-ass things, I mean, if we tell them you can't half-ass anything, they're, that whole thing, strive for perfection, achieve excellence type thing.
All right.
Try to do it the right way. We're human. Something happens. Hopefully nothing happens from it. There's no such thing as half-assing.
Right. And to be clear, that's, I want to stay away from that. I want to get away from that, but I'm looking at, how much of that is actually happening.
I hate to think about it. And the number would probably be staggering right now.
Yeah.
And it's growing. It's getting better. But I'm looking at what I can do to change that rather than look back at, hey, here's a need. What can I do about it? Who can I be about it?
What is the biggest issue you're seeing right now?
Not enough people at an event like this.
Yeah.
So in my closing remarks, this is a great venue.
It really is.
They really did. They tried to do a great job at getting these back. I participate heavily in the Super Saturday event. That didn't pan out this year. And this one happened. And in the Northeast, we don't have ASTE up here. We don't have Vision up here or STX down in Florida. We need somewhere everywhere that people can get to.
I agree.
And as much as I wasn't sure how I felt about the water park and family environment, but we can make this work.
Yeah.
So we were talking earlier about what more we can do. And hey, we go for it. We throw things at the wall. We see what sticks.
Amen.
And it goes how it goes.
That's it.
And we just change and improve and add to. And there's going to be times we got to look back and say, no, we need to stop doing that and do something different.
Yep.
Yep.
I agree 110%. I really think it was a great event.
Yep.
I think it's got tons of potential to be much bigger.
Look at the trainers. Brandon Steckler.
Yeah, that's huge.
David Hobbs. What more do you want?
Exactly. And here's the thing is Tom and I were talking about this earlier. Just right in the area right here. I mean, we must have gotten comments from 25, 30 shops that say, man, I'd have brought everybody. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know. And they're just right here. I think it's easy for events to look like they're in competition with one another. Oh. But you've got so much right here that you can bring together, and you can put these shops in this event, in this venue, and they're miles away. Right? And like I said, I'm not talking bad about your shops up here, but drive down the street. I'm sure you did.
That would, Super Saturdays in my hometown, arguably. Yeah. And I have a long relationship with a lot of shops. And I almost look at myself I'm not having the conversation that needs to be had to get them there. It's like literally right down the street from ATC. Yeah. And I can't get them there. And I'm like, what do I need to say? What do I need to do to get them there? And it's one of them things. I mean, I think it's the same rhetoric after every show. You know, Vision's a big boy. STX is big boy. ASTE's really did an outstanding job this year, and we can bring some of that up here.
Yeah.
I think
I agree, and I think we had Adam Rath on the show. We've had Tom on the show, and they're local. I think it starts with them. I think it starts with the board. I think it starts with the shop owner going out and telling the other shop owners, you need to be here. This is exciting. This is big. There's a better way to do things. And maybe that's not the way to say it, but show them there's a better way. We care. We want something better for you than what you have right now. And you know, the term always comes up in almost every single episode. We've been subsidizing the repairs on client vehicles with the money that was supposed to feed our families and care for our children and do the things that protect us as human beings. We've been subsidizing for our clients for so long that it's tough to take that money and go do something like this. Now, the minute that you realize that one little bit of knowledge that helps you understand that you're doing that, takes you out of that position and gets you to an event like this, right? Change your life.
Yeah, they don't really know what it feels like to walk out of an event like this and be pumped about going to work, about what. Yeah. I mean, the people who go to these events know, but if you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah.
You know, I want my days to be easier. I want, when I look at a car and I have a conversation with a customer about a piece of equipment, I want to know what I'm talking about. I want it to be easy. I don't want to give them a whole bunch of I don't knows. I mean, I got plenty of I don't knows in my back pocket, but the more I can work through, my day goes easier. And I'm sure it's that way with repairing vehicles.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's that way with running a shop. It's that way with being a dad. It's that way with being a mom, right?
There's definitely no manual for those.
I know, right? You figure that one out. Well, fellas, thank you so much for being here. Kip, I have put your information in the comments so they can contact you. Yeah. What areas do you serve? You serve everywhere?
I'm accountable for anywhere in the U.S. So I got 550 cams I'd love to work with on a regular basis. Kind of hard to do.
Yeah.
But again, I'm going to play big and I'll help as many people as I can. But wherever you are in the U.S., you can reach out to me. If you want to reach out to your local Advanced Auto Parts commercial account manager, drop my name. They know how to find me.
That's it.
We'll get you the information you need to make the decision you need to make for yourself.
I'm pretty lucky. I've got a pretty awesome cam and pretty awesome regional people in my area. They do really good job of taking care of me. Leslie White, that was all about you being an awesome human being, just so you know. Guys, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the ASOG podcast. If you'd like to catch these episodes early, you can do so by becoming a patron. Just go to asog.site and click on the Become a Patron Now button. Becoming a patron helps support the show, gets you several perks, and is tax deductible. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and on YouTube so you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, shoot me an email. My email address is david@asog.site. That's david@asog.site. Until next time.